Across the sun-baked plains of the Serengeti, a high-stakes horror story plays out every single day. Microscopic in scale, but catastrophic in consequence. A solitary wildebeest stands motionless in the shimmering heat, its tail twitching weakly against a relentless, invisible enemy. To the untrained eye, the massive bull appears merely exhausted from the grueling seasonal migration. Look closer. Beneath the coarse, matted hair around its flanks, its groin, and behind its ears, and the true nightmare reveals itself. Thousands of swollen grayish-blue sacs cling tightly to its flesh, packed so densely that the animal's hide looks like a grotesque moving cobblestone road. These are ticks, nature's most ruthless micro-vampires, and they are literally draining the life out of a one-ton beast, drop by drop. Every year, millions of ungulates march across the African savanna, treading through tall grasses that harbor millions of hungry ectoparasites. A single tick is a minor inconvenience, a tiny speck waiting patiently at the tip of a grass blade, forelegs outstretched in a posture known as questing. But when hundreds of questing ticks lock onto a passing wildebeest, the math becomes terrifyingly lethal. A heavy infestation can host upwards of 10,000 ticks simultaneously. Together, this parasitic army can extract over 4 pounds of blood every single week. The consequences are devastating. Blood loss leads to severe anemia, leaving the wildebeest chronically lethargic and unable to keep pace with the herd. Worse still, as these arachnids drive their barbed mouthparts deep into the skin, they inject saliva laced with toxins and deadly pathogens like heart water and red water disease. Infection sets in. Wounds fester. Tissue rots around the attachment sites. Blinded by ticks massing around its eyes, choked by clusters invading its nostrils, the wildebeest is reduced to a walking corpse, primed for starvation or an easy kill by lurking predators. On its own, the wildebeest is virtually helpless. Its hooves cannot scratch its ears, its tail cannot reach its belly. Dust baths offer only fleeting relief, and rubbing against acacia trunks often tears open the skin, inviting secondary infections. Left unchecked, the parasite load will inevitably drag the titan down. But suddenly, a sharp metallic hissing sound pierces the hot air. Down from the thorn trees drop a pair of sleek brown birds with dagger-like orange and red beaks and piercing yellow eyes. They are oxpeckers, often romanticized as the gentle caretakers of the wilderness. They land directly onto the wildebeest's back with the sharp scuttling agility of woodpeckers scaling a tree trunk. What happens next is a visceral, bizarre display of nature's most complicated, uneasy alliance. The oxpeckers waste no time. Using their razor-sharp claws, modified specifically to grip tightly onto thick hide, they begin scrambling across the wildebeest's body. They hang upside down under its belly, scale its neck, and balance casually atop its massive horns. The birds deploy 2 distinct feeding techniques. The first is plucking, where the bird uses its heavy beak like a pair of precise surgical forceps, grabbing an engorged tick right where its mouthparts pierce the flesh and ripping it free with a sharp tug. Each tick is swallowed whole, bursting with rich blood. For a bird that needs thousands of calories a day to survive, a tick-laden wildebeest is a floating buffet of pure protein. The second technique is far more intense, known as scissoring. The oxpecker lays its bill flat against the animal's fur and rapidly opens and closes its mandibles like a pair of hair clippers, combing through the dense undercoat to snatch up tiny, unengorged tick larvae and dead skin scales before they can anchor themselves. Watch the wildebeest's reaction. Instead of flinching or shaking the birds away, the massive herbivore stands perfectly still. It drops its head, lowers its ears, and tilts its neck, actively opening up its most vulnerable parasite-choked crevices to the birds. It yields completely to the feathered surgeons, allowing them to probe deep inside its ear canals, where dozens of soft ticks cluster in the dark, warm folds to feed undisturbed. The bird's beak plunges into the ear, wrenching out tick after tick, while the wildebeest groans in visible relief. The intense itching that was driving the animal mad begins to recede. Yet this interaction is far from a simple, heartwarming tale of mutual friendship. Evolution rarely produces pure altruism. The relationship between the wildebeest and the oxpecker exists on a razor-thin edge between beneficial symbiosis and outright parasitism. The oxpecker is not performing medical charity. It is an obligate blood feeder that craves red blood above all else. Ticks are merely the most convenient containers for that liquid gold. When tick populations on the wildebeest run low, or when the birds crave a direct source of energy, their behavior turns dark and sinister. Using their sharp beaks, the oxpeckers will target existing wounds on the wildebeest's body. Instead of letting the flesh heal, the birds deliberately peck at the scab, peeling it away to drink the fresh, warm blood bubbling up underneath. They hack away at the margins of the wound, keeping it open, raw, and bleeding for days on end. Scientists observing oxpecker behavior have noted that in areas where ticks are scarce, the birds spend a significant portion of their time actively creating and expanding open sores on their host animals. To the wildebeest, this is an agonizing trade-off. It endures the localized pain of open wounds and the risk of localized infection in exchange for relief from the systemic, slow death sentence of a full-blown tick infestation. It tolerates the feathered vampires on its back because the alternative is far worse. As the afternoon sun begins to dip towards the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the savanna, the true test of this brutal partnership arrives. Out in the tall, dry grass, a pride of lionesses moves into position. Downwind and invisible, a hunting lioness creeps closer, her golden eyes locked onto the weakened wildebeest, which is still standing motionless as the oxpeckers work on its neck. The wildebeest's senses are dulled by exhaustion and the residual effects of blood loss. It has not noticed the silent advance of the apex predator just 20 yards away. The lioness coils her hindquarters, preparing to launch an explosive, lethal ambush. Because the wildebeest's head is lowered, its own vision is obstructed. But the oxpeckers, perched high on the animal's shoulders, have an elevated 360-degree view of the surrounding terrain. Their keen eyes catch the slight rustle of grass and the subtle shift of a predator's shoulder. Instantly, the birds react. They let out a series of harsh, piercing, rattling alarm calls that echo across the open plain, a frantic sound that every herbivore in the ecosystem recognizes. Before the lioness can even spring from her crouch, the oxpeckers leap into the air in a sudden flurry of wings. That alarm call is the wildebeest's salvation. The instant the birds flush, the bull's instincts kick in. It snaps its head up, spots the incoming lioness, and lunges forward into a desperate, explosive gallop. The extra split second of warning bought by the birds is the exact margin between life and death. The lioness charges, kicking up dust, but the distance is too great. The wildebeest reaches the safety of the main herd, its heart pounding, alive to see another sunrise. Without the oxpeckers, that wildebeest would have been too weak, too blind, and too slow to detect or outrun the predator. The birds cleared hundreds of blood-sucking parasites from its skin, reducing its toxic load and giving its body a fighting chance to recover. In return, the birds received a dense, high-calorie meal, a source of nest-building material pulled directly from the animal's coat, and a mobile platform from which to navigate the dangerous landscape. This is the chaotic, uncompromising reality of the natural world. Out on the African plains, survival is never clean, neat, or gentle. Relationships are forged not out of kindness, but out of relentless evolutionary necessity. The wildebeest carries the physical scars of its feathered companions, bearing open wounds that bleed into the dust, while the oxpeckers fly away with beaks stained crimson. It is a violent, parasitic truce, a daily negotiation between pain and survival. Yet, in a land where millions of tiny jaws are constantly waiting in the grass to tear you down from the inside out, having a bloodthirsty ally on your back is often the only thing that keeps you standing.